Thanks for tuning in and welcome back to the shop. Today I'm jumping into the world of completely custom design for the interior trim of the entry door on this camper, our 2013 Mitsubishi Fuso FG. And boy oh boy does it open up a can of worms for failures. I'm actually going to be trying to make this entire custom trim piece with my 3D printer. And no, my 3D printer is not that big. So that means this door trim is going to be made up of a lot of little pieces. To start with, I just made a few basic test profiles in SketchUp. Then I printed a small piece just to test how well it would fit, which it didn't. I guess it didn't quite measure enough. So I went back and changed some of the dimensions and printed a new version. It works a little bit better. But no matter how perfect I make that fit, I still have a big problem. Like a really big problem. Because I need to make a really tall part. It's actually over 67 inches high here. And clearly, I can't print that all as one piece on my little printer. So I decided to make it fit together like Lego. Now, I didn't go nearly to the design lengths that Lego does, but with bumps in the top and holes in the bottom, they do fit together reasonably well. And since my design tolerances are not up to the standards of Lego, Lord Business, will be using
the Kraggle, the most powerful super
glue. I'm sorry, it's crazy glue, super glue. If you haven't seen the Lego movie by now, come on, it's 2024, it's been 10 years. Spoiler alert, the Kraggle is just crazy glue. So now that I have a functional design, it's time to stretch this to the maximum height I can fit in my printer by taking 67 inches and dividing it into the maximum height that my printer can print in whole pieces. And this is where your public school math goes out the door. That's right, 67 divided by 8 equals 213 millimeters. I do keep telling you that metric is far easier. With the part fully designed and tested, I need to print 16 of these vertical pieces. 8 pieces to make up each side, and then Kraggle them together. Now, because of how long it takes to print this many parts, I actually started this process several weeks ago, and it's a good thing that I did. With the printer running 24 hours a day, there's a high possibility of undetected failure, so I have a camera that can check in on it from time to time. Problem being, it was the middle of the night, and I had no idea that this is what was unfolding. That's a pretty epic failure. Yep, when things come unstuck from the bed, the printer just happily continues along making spaghetti until it reaches the end of the print. But that's okay, it's just plastic. We can start again and we'll have what we need in another day or so. Until the power went out 12 hours into the print while I was at work, and I ended up with these little things. But we will persevere. I hit print again, and after another day we have some more. And then I'll hit print again and we'll have more, and then we'll have more, and then... And now I have all of these beautiful pièces de résistance. In order to turn 8 of these pièces de résistance into 2 pieces of 67-inch pièces de résistance, I'm basically going to need to put the Kraggle on top of one piece, and then...
Put the piece of resistance on the Kraggle.
And then...
Put the piece of resistance onto the Kraggle. And then...
Let's see how much of this I can stick together without gluing my fingers to it. I'm starting by gluing them together in pairs to help keep things stable as the glue sets. Though this is crazy glue, it's not a super fast setting glue, so I'll need to leave these to cure for a bit. Later, I'll add the 2s together to make 4s, and then the 4s together to make 8s. While we're waiting for those first few pieces to dry, let's talk about the corners. With the vertical sections, it's pretty easy to make a single shape and then just stretch it up, and it fits over the edge. But when we get to the corners, we can't quite do the same thing. For the corner, it's going to be much easier to print the piece flat instead of trying to go up and have a big overhang. So to start with, I'm just going to make a piece that is the shape of the corner to make sure that I have the pattern right and that this fits when it's done. Once I've confirmed that the pattern fits, I can turn that into the full 3D printed shape. But there's a bit of a downside. 3D printing works by depositing a layer and then moving up and repeating the next layer. When you have a part that is consistent vertical layers, they're all the same size, it comes out fairly smooth. But the problem becomes when you have a part that has a very shallow angle on it. Each time it moves up a layer and moves over to create the angle, you end up with very coarse layer lines. Now sometimes this isn't a problem depending on the part that you're making, but because I want these parts to be reasonably smooth, I am going to use some glazing putty to help smooth it out. Glazing putty, or spot putty, is used in auto body repair as a final smoothing layer in bodywork. It's meant to fill in small scratches, imperfections, and small dents. Because these are very small areas to smooth out, this stuff works perfectly. It dries quickly and is easy to sand back off. So, after a bunch of sanding, the two corner pieces are ready, and after a lot more repetitions of
Put the piece of resistance onto the craggle.
we finally have a couple of 67-inch pieces of resistance. Ta-da! Now, although I've never actually made a 3D printed door trim before, I have had somewhat of a level of comfort in the build up to this point. But for the next step, I've never actually done this before, so I'm really hoping it works. I'm going to start by taking one of these trims and placing it on the side of the door. While it may not seem like much, keep in mind that this is a 67-inch long piece of 3D printed plastic held together with crazy glue. I have no idea how strong it actually is. I'm just looking for the shape. Please don't break. Looks like we got it. Oh, and if you've been wondering, yes, there's a fridge there now. It's not permanently installed, it's just kind of a placeholder. It also happens to make a useful table to put stuff on, but that will be our fridge. My next step is a very light sanding of this, and it's not because it needs roughening up or anything, but there are a couple of little imperfections here and there, and a little bit of glue at some of the joints. So I wanted to put it in place to give it a bit more support so that I can push on it without worrying about breaking the connection points. That's really loud. Again, I don't need this perfectly smooth. I just want to make sure there's no big lumps in it. So now that I've given it a quick sand from top to bottom to get rid of any of the small lumps of plastic from 3D printing, it's time to try wrap. Full disclosure, I've never tried to wrap anything before in my life other than presents, and I'm not very good at presents. So let's start with one of the small pieces. Well, I think that may have been the wrong choice. I was getting there, but I don't think this is the right shape to try your very first piece. And then it got worse. Woo! Unfortunately, this old hairdryer, the cord started smoking right there. So I'm not really sure what I'm gonna do now. And so while this episode isn't quite working out how I hoped it would, I do know these pieces fit, the craggle holds it together, the wrap can go around the corners, and it'll probably go around the corners a little bit better when it's not the first time and the hairdryer cord isn't smoking. So just because everything hasn't worked perfectly doesn't mean I haven't made some progress. I'll regroup, I'll fix that cord, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching, and don't forget,
Everything is awesome.
Everything is awesome.